In today's video, we have some more NHL prospect signings to discuss, plus the Coyotes may be facing some pretty stiff penalties for their draft-eligible prospect testing fiasco that's been under investigation, and another longtime NHLer has called it a career. We'll discuss the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news topics to discuss today, and let's kick things off with another NHLer calling it a career, this time Kris Versteeg, who's played for 11 seasons for a variety of teams, has announced his retirement from professional hockey. Now, Versteeg was a Boston Bruins pick way back, never actually played for the Bruins. He was traded before he ever signed his entry-level deal and ended up playing for a variety of teams, but he's mostly known for his time with the Chicago Blackhawks, where he won a couple of different Stanley Cup championships with them. Obviously had a pretty successful career. He played in 643 NHL games, putting up 358 points, and he also appeared in 93 playoff games, played a little bit over in Europe as well, and certainly, like I said, had a pretty successful career overall, pretty solid run for Versteeg in the NHL over 11 seasons with a variety of teams, but like I said, probably most known for his time with the Chicago Blackhawks. We'll certainly wish him the best as he rides off into retirement. Now let's jump in to some of the prospect signings. Now, let's get started with a KHL player who was expected to join the North American ranks this summer and likely sign with the Montreal Canadiens or the Toronto Maple Leafs, who were the top two suitors. But Konstatin Okulov, who was one of the more intriguing KHL free agents to keep your eye on, has decided to stay in the KHL and has signed another one-year deal with CSKA. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the NHL season and all the uncertainty going on right now. Obviously, the NHL has made it known on multiple occasions here that their primary goal is to finish the 1920 season and award a Stanley Cup, even if that means pushing back next season and having it start later than usual. Obviously, between that and the KHL season already being done, it was canceled before the playoffs were ever completed. So that could be a really long layoff for some of these players. And even though there was quite a long list of some decent talent from the KHL looking to make the jump to North America, or in some cases back to North America, that very well could entrust to some of these players and maybe stay put, where they're not going to have to wait so long to get back on the ice, start collecting a paycheck again, and get the rust off, so to speak, since they've been off for such a long period of time before they get back on the ice. So interesting decision. I know the Habs and the Leafs were both pretty in hard on this guy, showing a lot of interest, but he has remained over there for now. And like I said, we very well might see more KHL free agents decide to make that choice as well, and certainly makes a lot of sense as to why. But as the KHL free agency period gets closer here, I guess we'll see what some of these decisions are for some of these other players. Now, the Ottawa Senators have signed a pair of entry-level contracts to a pair of their prospects, including defenseman Jonathan Aspirot. Now, Aspirot played his junior hockey in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, played for the Moncton Wildcats. He was not drafted. He did go on to sign an AHL contract and played with their Belleville Senators team last year, had a decent showing, and it now gets his full NHL entry-level contract. So Aspirot is now 20 years old, has 1 year of pro hockey under his belt, and will likely remain with Belleville, considering the depth that the Senators have within their prospects. He's going to have a lot of D-men to compete with to remain in Belleville, let alone make the jump to the NHL. But, another project defenseman for them to keep around and work with here over the next few years. Now, they've also signed another interesting prospect of theirs, and it's a goaltending prospect, Kevin Mandolese, who's played the last 4 years also in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League for the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles. Now, he was originally drafted a couple of years ago in 2018. He was a late round pick in the 6th round, as we see a lot of these goaltenders often go in the mid to late rounds of the NHL drafts. Mandolese has shown continuous improvement over the last 3 or 4 years. This past year was certainly his best to close out his junior career, where he put up a 2.33 goals against average and a .925 save percentage, which I believe he appeared in 33 or 34 games for the Screaming Eagles before the season unfortunately came to an early end for all of our junior franchises across Canada. But Mandolese is certainly another intriguing guy. He's still 19, not 20 years old here quite yet, but obviously will make the jump to pro hockey next season. He's got 4 years of junior under his belt now, and of course he's going to have some other interesting goalie prospects to compete with in the Senators system. Of course, they have guys like Marcus Högberg, who pretty well made almost a full-time jump to the NHL this past year, considering Anders Nilsson was out for such a long stretch with injuries, and even Craig Anderson a little bit at times. He was up there in Ottawa for quite a long stretch and appears to be, I think, NHL ready for a full-time gig likely next year. It's quite possible Craig Anderson retires. Anders Nilsson's health is a big question mark as well, considering he went through a long recovery from a concussion. It's not quite known exactly where things stand with him right now, but he is under contract for next year where Anderson is not. So at least he'll be within the organization in some capacity, depending on his health. And then, of course, they have some other younger goalies that Mandolese can kind of compete with for AHL time, including guys like Philip Gustafsson and Joey Decord. He very well could end up starting in the East Coast League. That's quite possible. But either way, he'll get his pro career started next year. And like I said, the Sens don't have any shortage of goalie prospects right now in their system, which is good to have that kind of depth, and they're all different age levels and different stages of their development, and all have different backgrounds as well. So we'll see how that works out for them for future goaltending. Now, as I mentioned as well, we do have some updates on the situation involving the Arizona Coyotes and the investigation that's been ongoing by the NHL in regards to their testing of draft-eligible NHL prospect. The Coyotes do stand in being accused of doing some tests on draft-eligible players, mostly Canadian Junior Hockey League players, but I believe there are some American-born prospects as well playing in the States that were under this as well. So obviously they have the draft combine for a reason. They give all NHL teams access to the same sort of test and information to make their decisions and opinions on these players. And the Coyotes, like I said, were accused of kind of going above and beyond that and doing their own thing. And there's a lot of teams pushing for some pretty harsh penalties, and they could be facing some pretty severe ones, including the loss of a first-round draft pick and maybe even a second-round pick as well. Now, that first-round pick is believed to not be this year in 2020. That it would likely be next year if that is the case, possibly a 2021 first-round pick, but they could be possibly losing a second-round pick this year in 2020. Now, I think the rationale behind that is obviously when it comes to the first round picks this year, even if they did do testing, a lot of teams right now are kind of on the same boat with a lot of the information on the the higher ranked players in the draft, but it's going to be the later rounds, the second, third, fourth rounds, where they might have more information that might give them a bit of an edge that they shouldn't have, which makes sense why they might want to take away a second round pick. And if they lose a first round pick next year, well, clearly that would be a big blow. Typically, you can often get some pretty solid players in the first and second round. It's not quite clear, obviously, how next season is going to go for Arizona. So obviously, we don't know how high or how low that first round pick could end up being. But regardless of the fact, to have two picks, if that's what it turns out to be, taken from them for these actions, that is going to be a big blow. I certainly can't help but wonder about the job security of GM John Chayka, because clearly, regardless of what his involvement was in this, he is the head of hockey operations for that team, and unfortunately, he could end up taking the fall. I can't help but wonder. I mean, we know this team is under new ownership. There is some talk about there possibly being some financial penalties as well, and I wonder if the NHL might hold off on that and maybe go in a different direction, like the draft picks, just because obviously they don't want to penalize a brand new owner in a market that's already struggling. Obviously, that new owner would have had no knowledge of this, because this would have been something that happened before he got involved with the franchise. So it might make sense that even if they don't impose him to remove Chayka as GM, that maybe he would go that route as well. I mean, that's a speculation on my part. I don't have any information or any rumors that suggest that Chayka's job is in jeopardy, but I can't help but wonder, with a fairly new owner and new GM relationship here, that this is not going to get things off to a good start, and that he could be facing the music for some bad decision making for getting some information on these prospects that they shouldn't have, if they are indeed found guilty and these penalties are indeed levied against them as a franchise. It'd be a big blow. Obviously, they made a big deal this year to acquire Taylor Hall. That deal, we can't really say it worked out overly well, as the NHL season was put on pause. They were not in a playoff spot. There's no guarantee they're going to retain him through free agency. I would think the odds are probably not great, in my opinion, considering how the team did after his arrival. With all that in mind, I can't help but wonder if the new owner there might be asking himself if he has the right team in place to lead the franchise. So let me know what your thoughts are on these potential penalties for the Coyotes. Do you think it could end up costing John Chayka his job as GM of the franchise? And what are their ownership going to think of this as well? Let me know what you think down below, what's fair and what the outcome likely could be as we get closer to maybe finding out and getting a decision from the NHL. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications. As well, I want to take an opportunity to thank everybody who's become a member of this channel through our memberships feature. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I will catch you next time.